Shkoyach Rabbi Yonason. Meirav Rabbeisai, I was asked this evening to address the benefactors and the supporters of this wonderful organization, Legadel. However, I really do not want, nor do I intend to address the people seated here in this room tonight. You have to be honest in life, and I have to tell you the truth, Rabbi Isai, I don't want to talk to you tonight. I want to talk, Rabbi Isai, to a young boy, a boy named Pini, who's a Talmud in Pardes. I want to talk to a boy called David, who's a Talmud in Torah Vidas. I want to talk to Naftali, who was a Talmud in Tiferet Shloimeh. Rabbi Isai, Pini comes to class every single day. And he sits in his desk. And he looks at the Rebbe. And he looks around at his fellow Talmidim. And he watches them as they follow what's happening. They follow the kasha. They follow the teretz. They understand the raya. Some of them raise their hands and ask a question. And the Rebbe says, Gewaldig, gut gefragt. And Pini sits in his class. He sits in his desk. And he realizes, he understands that he's not part of what's going on. He doesn't follow the kasha. He doesn't understand the teretz. He doesn't relate to the raya. And the question that was asked means nothing to him. Pini's mind is jumping. It's all over the place. Pini suffers from hyperactivity. And David in Torah Vidas is a 7-year-old. And he watches how his friends read a pasuk, another pasuk, and they teach. And when David looks at the words jump in his eyes. They move around. David suffers from dyslexia. David can't read. Rabbi Isai, Naftali is hyperactive. He can't sit in his seat. He waits for the moment that the Rebbe is going to throw him out of the class because at least then he can walk around. He can't sit. And in Menorah, there's a boy called Menachem. And Menachem suffers from anxiety. From the minute he gets in the class, he's in a panic. Maybe he's going to be called upon to read. And that for him is the greatest tragedy in the world. Rabbi Isai, I want to speak to Pini. And I want to speak to Naftali and to David. We all have to speak to them. But more importantly, we have to listen to them. We have to listen to the pain. We have to listen to their sorrow. We have to understand what it is that they're experiencing. And I want to tell you tonight, Rabbi Isai, their pain and sorrow is not from the fact that he has attention deficit disorder or dyslexia or anxiety. Their pain comes from the fact that deep down they know or they believe, they've come to believe that they are failures, that they are bad goods, that somehow in the making of their personality something went wrong. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kaviyochu was matzliach with the roiv. But there were exceptions in which Rahman al-Islam, he failed. These children believe that. Because dyslexia is something they can deal with. Children are resilient. They can cope with that. They can't cope with the knowledge that they are failing. They are letting their parents down. They are letting the adults in their lives down. They can't cope with the knowledge that they are damaged goods. And you know why they believe that? Because some of the adults in their lives believe that. Some of the adults in their lives see the rest of the class as the mutzlochim, This is the success of a Kadosh Baruch Hu here in Olam Hazeh. And then there are the nechsholim, there are the failures. They've internalized that message, Rabbi Isai. And I want to respond to that mistake tonight. In Eretz Yisrael, there's a Rebbe called the Tolner Rebbe. Tolner Rebbe is a kluge Yid from the Chakima de Yehudoi in Eretz Yisrael. A Baleitze, Talmud Chacham Muflug, and a Gvalike Mechanech. And he was once asked, a Moisid was looking for a Manal, and he was asked, how should we determine we have two candidates, we don't know which one to take? He said to them, listen, in the interview, bring a Talmud and watch how they interact with the Talmud. If one of the Menalim not only talks to the Talmud, but bends down and looks the Talmud eye to eye, then you know he's the Menal that you want to take. Rabbi said we have to listen to Pini, we have to listen to David, to Naftali. We have to respond truthfully and honestly. And we can only answer if we have an answer. We can only answer truthfully if we have a truthful answer. And the question is, what's Taka going on? What happened? The Rebbeinu Shalom wants Talmidim that are going to learn Mishnayis and Gemara and finish Mesechtes and hopefully finish Shas and become Talmidei Chachamim, Blomdim. So how does ADD come into the picture? How does dyslexia come into the picture? Why is that part of the plan? Abu Yisai, the Rebbeinu Shalom was mezakemi that my parnasa involves being a rov in a kehillah, a Sfardische kehillah in Finchley, and the nucleus of this kehillah are Yidden who came from Iran. And a lot of these mishpachas fled in 1979 at the time of the revolution. And there's a fascinating story that happened with one particular mishpacha who were so wealthy and so well established and so well connected that they couldn't bring themselves to leave. They lived in a mansion, they had servants, they had a private security team. They felt that they can overcome this wave. It's not worth it for them to leave it all behind and run. And to make the story short, it's a long story, but to make the story short, the mother was sitting at home waiting for her husband to come back from work one night. And time goes on, and he's not coming. He's meant to be home at 6, and the hour is ticking, and it's 7, and it's 8, and he's not home. Her 2 children are sleeping upstairs. She doesn't know what to do. She decides she has to leave them, and she goes to see by his office to see where he is. And when she comes to the office building, the office block, she sees her husband lying on the ground in a puddle of blood. He was shot. He was killed. Chorav Allah Iloma. Her husband died so suddenly. They arranged a levaya. And she realizes that she has to flee, and she has to flee as soon as possible. So she makes arrangements with a guide who promises to take her over the border, to smuggle her over the border in return for a hefty fee. And they make up, they're going to meet at 4 o'clock in the morning at this and this corner, and they're going to go on camelback, and from there they're going to go together over the mountains to Afghanistan, and then she'll be a free person. She meets this man with her 2 children. She takes whatever valuable she can in a bag, and she meets him. She's leaving everything behind. Their whole empire and business is going to be left behind. She's starting a new life. The man puts her on a camel and the children on a camel, and they start traveling. And when they get a few miles out of town where there's a point of no return, suddenly this man tells her to get off the camel. And he pulls out a gun and he points it to her head. And she says, really, I should shoot you on both of your children right now and right here and get over with this. First of all, give me all the valuables that you have. Second of all, let me make the rules very clear. I will take you over the border, but if you don't listen to my instructions, every one of my instructions immediately, I will shoot your children first and then you. She's devastated. This man suddenly turned into a monster. But she has no choice. She complies, and they start going. And this journey is as arduous as one can possibly imagine. They go through swamps. They climb up mountains and cactuses. She lost her shoes on the way. At one point, she fell and tumbled. She had damage to her back. She couldn't move, but there was a gun to her head. Worse yet, there was a gun to her children, said she begged, leave us here in the desert, leave us in the wilderness, just go. He said, I'm not going to leave you, you'll get caught, you'll tattletale on me, I'm going to shoot your kids and you. At some point, they reached a mountain, and between these two mountains, there was a bridge made up of rope. And she sees this bridge, it's shaking, and the abyss is hundreds and hundreds of feet down. She says, I can't walk on this with my kids, we're not going to make it. He says, you don't walk, I shoot. She's walking on the string between two mountains. Rabbi Isai, in the end, to make a very long story very short, they get to the other side of the border, and she's a free person. But before she goes off, the man turns to her and he says, Madame, I want to ask you for your forgiveness. I hereby return to you all the valuables that I took from you, plus the fee that you paid me. I am a Yid. I don't want to be charged for saving you. I want mechila from you, but you should realize that when I saw you, when I saw your children, I knew there's no possible way you're going to make it through this journey. You're affluent, you're spoiled. You've never had a hard day in your life. How are you going to survive such hardship? I knew the only thing that can get you to freedom is a gun. And I decided then and there, if that's what it takes, that's what I'll do. Forgive me. Rabbi Isai, Klal Yisrael knows. We know, we understand that shiftecho mishantecho, that when we feel a stick from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, David HaMelech compares Klal Yisrael to sheep. Sheep are very vulnerable. Hashem roi. Sheep can't look after themselves. One wolf and they're gone. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes them to the good pastures and to the nice water, not the heavy water. But sometimes there's a matziv of Elech begeitz al moves. You walk between mountains and it becomes dark and you feel you're abandoned. And the sheep says, where did the shepherd go? Who's the pastach? Shiftecho mishantecho. It's a very narrow path at the height of a mountain, but the shepherd looks at the back, and if he sees the sheep is going off, he has a stick, and he guides it in the right direction, and that stick is the greatest nechama, the greatest comfort, because it reminds the sheep that the shepherd is behind me. I'm not alone. Heimo yenachamuni. On the Soin steht in Svarim is Kimenasa Hashem Elokeichem Oischem. Ladas, das is Miloshin V'odom Yodo Eschavo. Das is the iskashus between a Yid and a HaKadosh Baruch Hu. On Nisoyim brings the Yid to a stronger kesher with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's only one problem, Rabbi Isai. We're accustomed to Nisyonis in Bonne, in Chaya, in Mezoyne. But the one area where we don't expect a Nisoyin, and where it makes no sense to us that there should be a Nisoyin, is in the area of Limud HaTorah. How could there be a Nisayan? This is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from us. Kavyochel, it seems to be Ki'ilu the Rabbi was shoifich lekitin shomayim l'toich panov. Geshuni mistapeach benachlas Hashem. A child wants to learn Torah. He comes to learn Torah. And he's constitutionally incapable of doing so. What's Pshat? What kind of Nisayan is that? Rabbi Isai, so kommt bald Shavuos. The Gemara sagt in Shabbos, B'shah she'ala Moshe l'Amorim, Omru malachi asharis lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ribono shel Olam, Mali yelud isha beinenu. Mali yelud isha beinenu. What's a human being of flesh and blood? What's he doing up here b'Shamayim? Omar lahem bo likach es ha-Torah. He came to take the Torah. Omru loi Ribono shel Olam. Chemdo gnuza she gnuza lefanecha teisha meyos shishim v'arba doiros lifnei brias ha'olam. This hidden treasure that's been here for so many generations before the creation of the world. V'ata bo litna lebasar v'adam. You coming to give it to a basar v'adam? Mo'enosh kisiskerenu ben adam kisifkedenu. Hashem Adinenu ma'adi shimcha b'chol ha'aretz tno hitchol hashamayim. Why are you giving him the Torah? And HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe Rabbeinu anei lehem tshuva. respond. And the Lomdim are masbir this agadite that Moshe, that the Malachim's taina was a taina of a bar metzre, that there bashamayim they have a dinkdime. Rabbi Isai, I want to share with you a pshat in this agadite from Tzadike Emes, Talmidei Abal Shem. What did the Malachim want over here, Rabbi Isai? What did they want? Why did they mind that Moshe Rabbeinu should take the Torah? The Malachim were concerned for Kvod Shamayim. They made an offer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and told him, Ribono Shel Olam, we're going to make you a yeshiva like never existed before. Every Talmud is going to be at a Kiveger. Every Svara is going to be a Svara of Baruch Ber. A yeshiva where it's going to be Tanoim. Not Tanoim, Malachim. What are you giving a yeshiva for to Basar Vadam? Basar Vadam have problems. They have issues. Why are you giving them Torah? They need Legadel. They need intervention. Why should they be given the Torah? Zogt HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Moshe anei lehem tshuva. Moshe says, I'm afraid. Zogt him the Ribono Shel Olam, halt on in the Kisei HaKavod. Moshe Rabbeinu's teretz is rooted in the Kisei HaKavod. And what's his teretz, Rabbi Isai? What's his teretz? Rabbi Isai, what's his teretz? It's doch a starke taina. You can have an elite yeshiva. You can have a yeshiva that doesn't need Legadel. There's no dyslexia in this yeshiva. There's no attention deficit disorder. There's no hyperactivity. There's no anxiety. There's no social problems. Even the Tanoim, even Moshe Rabbeinu is unqualified to be a Talmud in such a yeshiva. Because Sof Kol Sof, someone who's Karus Michoimer is not the same as a Malach. The Darg of Limud HaTorah the Malachim have is Bein Aroich higher. Zok the Moshe Rabbeinu Mineu Bei Klum LeMitzrayim Yeraditem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants a Torah that comes from Mitzrayim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants a yeshiva where you have to struggle, where it's a challenge, where Shas doesn't fly into your head, where the Ivre doesn't go easy. That's the Svara that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. He wants that Talmud. His Kriya he wants. Nicht die Talmidei Chachamim Muflogim. He wants a Talmud Chacham Muflog that comes mitoich Mitzrayim. He wants someone who suffers with dyslexia and sits down every night to learn a Perek Mishnayos. There's a Medrash in Parshas Nosoi, Medrash Rabbah, which says, Nis'ave HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Very rarely do we find in Chazal such a Lashon L'gabe HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Nis'ave. Nis'ave means this is the deepest roots and this is the Tainug HaElyon, and it's something that we can't necessarily explain or understand because Taiv is greater than something that can be explained with Chochmah. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants a Dira Batachtoinim, Dafke Lemato. He wants a Yisr Na'or that comes Dafke Mitoich HaChoyshech. He wants that Talmud Torah that comes with struggle, that comes with pain, that comes with hardship. That the Talmud doesn't feel satisfied. He doesn't feel fulfilled. Nobody wants to be in Choshech. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants a Torah that comes mitoich HaChoshech. Maybe dafke those Talmidim that were chosen that they have to be in a matzav of Choshech, maybe they are the ones who are memaleh the greatest Tainug HaElyon. Maybe they're not writing Marachas of Reb Kiveger. If they can write Marachas of Reb Kiveger, there'll be a tviyah why they don't. But if all they reach is a Perek Mishnayos, is Kengor Zayin that this Perek Mishnayos, Rabbi Isai, Kodesh Baruch Hu is Chodi, with this Perek Mishnayos more than many other Greis Marachas. David HaMelech was mispalo that a Perek Tilim should be like a halis, like going for a halis. A Perek Tilim. Rabbi Isai, our children need to know, they need to see that we don't consider them to be failures. We don't consider them to be a b'diavad. We don't consider them to be second rate. It's not an unfortunate tragedy that they have to use the services of Legadel. They need to know that we genuinely and truthfully cherish their limud HaTorah. In spite of the struggles, or because of the struggles, they need to know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu values every Mishnah, every Pasuk, every Perek Tilim. Rabbi Isai, ich bin nicht kein Novi, and I'm not a Yodea Das Elyon, but I can tell you, if you have 100 pounds in your pocket, and you asked me, my opinion, what's a good place to invest it? Where can you become a shutef with HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Where is it memale the greatest tainuk? Where is the greatest oir? The greatest level of kedusha? Rabbi say, when it comes mitoich hachoshech, when you can become a partner of bringing Torah v'shinantam levanecha to that ben who's struggling, to that ben who has a hard time, for that ben who it's not easy. That ben has a special relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ki menasa Hashem elekeichem eschem lo das. There's a level of das, there's a iskashrus, there's a kesher, there's a dveikus that happens only mitoich hanisoyin, only mitoich shverikait, only mitoich hardship. There's a yisrin that only comes about through chayshach. But there's another factor here, Rabbi say. And this is why I believe it's so important that we should be machzik tevuso to this organization, Legadel. Rabbi say, it's not a secret that one of the great challenges that face Klal Yisrael today, if not the greatest, is what's known in Eretz Yisrael as the problem of noshrim, or the problem of people who go off the derech, the problem of youngsters who become disenchanted. They move away from Yiddishkeit. And there are many theories and many explanations as to why this is the case and how we can mitigate this. But I think there's one thing that we can all agree. You see, this problem is not new. It's been here 100 years ago. It's been here 200 years ago. But there's a big difference. 200 years ago, Rabbi Isai, somebody who went off the derech, you know who he was? You know who he was? He was the biggest muksher in the kitte. He was the biggest Baal Kishrin in his shir. He was the biggest lamdan in the yeshiva. You had a son of lamdan, you had to be scared. He shouldn't get verchapt in socialism, in communism, in askola. Shouldn't go carried away. In the last 30, 40 years, that's not the case. Hatzad hashover shebeineim of most of those who go off is that they were distressed. They were struggling. Cheder wasn't easy for them. Sitting in the Talmud Torah was difficult. Those are the ones who are at risk today. Legadel, therefore, is not only bringing Torah to the Tachtoinim, to these challenged individuals. Legadel is being matzil nefoshes. Legadel is being matzil klal Yisrael. And that's why Legadel needs our support, and Legadel needs our shutfis. They're doing what we all have to be doing. It's a chayv on Klal Yisrael, it's a chayv on Bezdin, it's a chayv on every yochid to make sure that a Talmud and a Cheder and a Talmud Torah should feel good, should be satisfied, should have a good experience. This is not the job of Yoeli Schwartz. This is my job. This is the job of the person sitting in your seat. And tonight is your opportunity to be mishtatev and to put your shoulder to this cause. Rabbi Isai, I have the great privilege. I live here in Golders Green, which is the Eir Ve'em B'Yisrael, a mokim full of chesed, full of Torah, full of gewaldige Yidden. But I also have a shochin toiv. You know, what's a good shochin? What's a good shochin? If you're a father of 8 children, what makes a good shochin? Huh? What would you say? Someone who sells ice cream? What makes a good friend? A good neighbor. So the Eibusher been Mizaki given that one of the hidden gems of Gold is Green is my neighbor lives next door, Mamish. And he's a mechanich, b'chesed elyon. And he's a mumche, he's a Talmud Chacham Muflik, first of all. But he's a mumche in chinuch, and he's dedicated his life to help youngsters. And I asked him in anticipation to this drasha tonight, I said to him, "Vos darf man da reden? What do you have to tell the Olam?" And he told me the following. And I don't know if our Zaydis did this or if our Zaydis knew about this. But in this generation, we have to listen to the mumchim. My shochin, Reb David Roth, told me, as the Olam has to realize, we as parents have to realize that we have to communicate to our children regularly, consistently, continuously, that we cherish them, that we value them, that they matter to us. We have to continuously communicate to our children how precious they are to us. And we have to mean it, and we have to demonstrate it not only with words but with action. In the way that we spend time with them, the things that we buy for them, the focus and attention that we give to them has to continuously communicate to our children that they are precious, that they matter, and that they are important. Spending time with your children one-on-one. For your father, it was good enough that your Zayda was a Yid who sat and learned, and their father saw it, and that was for him the greatest thing. But for your children, they need that you should spend time with them. They need that you should be invested in them, that you should show that they matter to you and their little petty concerns are important to you, that they are precious to you. It's not enough that you feel that way. They have to see it. You know, part of my job is that Mizman Lizman, you give up a sermon, the expectation is that you have to sometimes say a joke. It's an unfortunate reality, but that's the expectation. So I once repeated a joke that there was a Rov who came Lamailo, and er kommt auf ein Olam Emes, and in the Olam Emes sagt man ihm, Reb Yid, we're looking at your accounts here, and it doesn't look very good. It doesn't look very positive. What can I do? Ich bin nicht b'shleimus. So he sits on the side, and as he's sitting and waiting, the local bus driver comes along, and the bus driver comes up, and immediately they welcome him, and they say, Rebbe Yid, straight to Gan Eden. So the Rav intervenes and says, I know him, he was one of my mispalalim, he wasn't the greatest tzaddik, I'm not a tzaddik myself, but he goes to Gan Eden, and I'm putting on hold, what's pshat? So they say to him, you don't understand, when you used to give your drashis, the entire shul used to sleep. You spoke, and they slept. But when this bus driver drove his bus, oy, 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 every person on that bus was saying, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Rabbi say, it doesn't matter what your intentions are. You have to communicate to your children. You have to communicate to your children how precious they are, how important they are, and how much they matter. And with this, I want to finish with a story, Rabbi say. A maisa that I heard, I can't take achrayas, but I polima Hashem dover. It's a maisa neuro. Sounds like fiction, but the person who told it to me told me it's emes a maisa. There was a maisa with a yid in Boston. This yid was unfortunately Nebuch, a survivor of the war. And we know that the war took its toll on different people in different ways. And this man who went through Shiva Maduri Gehenim, at some point in that experience, he was emotionally shut off. Under those circumstances, probably correctly, his mind determined that if he wants to survive, he has to cut off any sense of warmth and sensitivity, any caring. He has to become cold and sterile and technical and distant and removed. and aloof. And that became his nature. This man had a ben Yochid. And it was very difficult for this boy to grow up in such a home. I told you earlier, Rabbi Isai, every boy was off the derech, every single one of them, a boy or a girl, you can eventually reach this point. Nobody ran away because it was so good and so wonderful. Nobody quits their job because I love my job so much I want to quit. People go away because they're in pain. People go because they're struggling because it's hard for them. And we have the ability to alleviate that pain. Legadel is proactively there to prevent that pain. This boy, growing up in such a home, picked himself up and he left. And he didn't only leave his home, but he left Yiddishkeit. Where did he go? He traveled to India. He cut off ties with his father. Father was no longer in contact with his ben Yochid. He spent a few years in India. And one day he's walking on the street and he sees someone from his hometown in Boston. And the fellow says, Shalom Aleichem, how are you? I'm so sorry to hear about what happened to your father. He says, what are you talking about? What happened? He says, what, you don't know? Your father passed away a few months ago. He had a heart attack. This fellow, in the back of his mind, his intention was always to have reconciliation, to make up with his father. Eventually, he wanted to bring things together. And now he realized it was too late. This was a terrible shock to his system. And he decides then and there he's leaving India. Where's he going to go? He goes to Eretz Yisrael. He wants to go to Eretz Yisrael. And he gets on a plane and he lands in Lud, Ben Gurion Airport, and he takes a taxi straight to Yerushalayim and he goes straight to the Kaisel. He remembered that his father, whenever somebody was going to Eretz Yisrael, he would send a zettel to the Kaisel. And he decides he wants, if there's any place that he can get some comfort, it's here. And he's standing there, and he says, Rebbeinu Shalom, Tate in Himmel, Tarti Mashma. Give me a simon, give me a sign, tell me that my father is moichumi. And he writes this down on a zettel. And he puts it into a crack in the wall. And as he does so, he realizes another zettel fell down onto the ground. And he has this deep, powerful compulsion to open it up. He knows it's not right, but he does so anyway. Rabbi Isai, this is the story as I heard it. He opens the zettel and he goes faint. It was his father's ksav yad. And his father says, Rebbeinu Shalom, ich bin agoises. Ich bet ein Zach, send a message to my son that I love him dearly, that I cherish him, that I believe in him, that I'm sorry for the fact that I didn't invest enough in him. I want him to always remember that I had a problem. It was my chisaron, but I wanted to be there for him. Belev sholem. Rabbi Isai, as long as we're still here, we can be there for our children. We can be there for them. Begashmias. We can communicate to them that we cherish them, that they matter to us, that the fact that they're a struggle is not an aberration or a mistake. They're not a b'diavad. They're not the second rate. Only the lamdan in the family is the hatzlacha, and the one who's struggling is somewhat, we have to make do with second rate goods. Each one of them in their own right is a ben yochid of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and if each one learns to the degree that they are capable, then the kedushas HaTorah, the value of Torah is the same. The Perek Mishnayos of the dyslexic is like the Marocha of Reb Kiva Eger, if that's the most he can achieve. We have to value that, we have to cherish that, and we have to show our children that they mean to us everything in the world. Tonight is our time to show this collectively as a kehillah, to show that all Kol Banayich Lemudei Hashem, that all of the Talmidim in every one of the Chardorim, every last one of them matters. Schools are not a statistic game where you have an 80% success rate. Every Talmid matters, and it's about time that we should invest in every Talmid equally. But those who are struggling need a greater investment. Our dollars and our pounds have to be put not in the yeshivas limitzuyonim, but for those Talmidim that are struggling, for Legadel. We have to show Legadel our support. We have to show HaKadosh Baruch Hu that every one of his Talmidim matters. We should be zoicher Rabbi Yisai that every Yachid, Vayichan Sham Yisrael, every Yachid is an indispensable member of that Vayichan. Every Yachid should be Makabel the Torah in the best way, in the optimal way, and in an uncompromised way. Amen v'amen.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Leibish, for your inspirational words and your support for Legadel. The plan, with your help, is to roll out Legadel across northwest London. We need your help. Please have a plan. Choose a plan on the right of the hall. Select one of the plans that's right for you and invest in Legadel. Thank you very much for coming and for your support.